Hello and welcome to week 13 of Introduction to Diversity. Today we're going to be talking about women, the oppressed majority. So again, this is the kind of subject that makes you get into sociology just so you can really, consider attacking inequality that's been present in society for a very long time. So again, the initial division of labor. This is just old school, hardcore sociological theory about the division of labor. But you can argue pretty much that the initial division of labor is between men and women. As society got a surplus and as we became more formalized and more specialized, women maintained those homemaker roles and men maintained the breadwinner roles. But the breadwinner role went beyond hunting and it started becoming, about jobs and access in a capitalist society. And then who is allowed to work in a capitalist society. And so, when you look at capitalism, you're looking at these core issues such as the division of labor, because the division of labor is what separates us into upper class and lower class positions. Those who have privilege, power, property, the propertied get to have the upper class positions, and the ones who don't have property are the oppressed. Okay? So, again, think about questions like when can a woman really own property? And again, it goes to the statistic that women are more likely to be property globally than they are to own property. And so I like to point out, in these classes that, for example, the only reason there's a woman in our college class right now is because we're in the United States. In other countries, there wouldn't be a woman in this classroom. And do we judge the other cultures because of denial of rights? Again, ethnocentrism, or do we look at it in a culturally relativistic form? So when it comes to patriarchal societies that are very male dominated, do we in America, do we agree with that? Do we judge that? What are our attitudes toward that? What's our perspective on women's rights? What's our perspective on all kinds of issues like that? But you have to see that the oppression of women is the oldest form of prejudice, discrimination, and power being enforced by males. Okay. Now, as we got deeper in American history, for example, you start to see where the association between male then becomes the association between male and white, then becomes the association between male, white with property. Okay, and so this is the idea that we all live in a social class system that is divided into social roles that are unequally distributed between the social classes. Okay, and so the main point is women have been stuck in the lower classes with all other minorities forever. Okay, as long as that kind of oppression exists, that's what's been going on. Women haven't had power over their own lives and especially not over others. I mean, of course, there are the instances of women having sway and influence. The old adage that there's always a woman behind a man, right? Because, whatever. Again, the old school way. So you're going to be looking at traditional versus egalitarian attitudes. Traditional attitudes are women's gender roles should be, they should stay in the home and they shouldn't be working out there. And then male gender roles, men are supposed to be the breadwinners. That's traditional. Egalitarian is everyone's more open minded, everyone just does whatever. We all take care of the kids, we all pay the bill when we go out to eat, okay? But then you have to again look at the intersectionality between being a woman and being white versus a woman and being black. A white woman was not expected to work in the fields, but a black woman was expected to work all day in the fields and do all the homemaker stuff on top of that. And so I love Sojourner Truth's argument of, again, we've talked about this before, but how would a white woman understand the experience of a black woman? Because the experience of being a woman for a black woman is very different than the experience of being a white woman. Hence this idea of the intersectionality. Okay, we're about to get into all of this. Okay, but women are again the most oppressed group. They've always been stuck without power in lower class positions, and they were not given opportunities. And this is sad because again, half the planet is women. So if we don't let half the women have an opportunity to have a voice, that's half of the possible Einsteins we're missing out on. Half of the potential make society great kind of people that for hundreds of years, thousands of years, we never got to hear the voices of women. And that's half the ideas that we were missing out on. Okay, so, all right, let's talk. So, there are just slightly more women than men on the planet. However, men still have privileged positions over women. So again, power is not always about majority. Again, a small country like England managed to rule the world. A lot of it's based upon your status and how much power you have, okay? So women were historically subjugated by men, stuck in the lower class social position in our hierarchically stratified class system that we live in. They were denied access to participate in society. Again, if you look at sociology books, psychology books, you're going to see a bunch of man's names for a long time until we get to about, the 20th century when you finally start seeing women's voices starting to be heard, okay? So women historically had no power. And again, having power is associated with life chances, your ability to have access to material goods, for example, okay? Women experience unequal treatment historically and to this day in the workforce, in the home. There is these basic ideas of male domination, these patriarchal attitudes that have been in the majority of societies in the world, and we're just now slowly starting to deconstruct this. But women experience prejudice and discrimination just like all other minority groups, okay? And a lot of this comes to applications. If someone's doing an interview and they see a woman's name versus a man's name, who do they call? Scholars are always pointing out that, the people that review the papers that get published discriminate based upon whether it's a woman. That's why we need these blind auditions where you don't put a name and you don't have a face and you interview and you don't know what sex somebody is. Because once you know what sex they are, then we start to attribute gender roles and we start to attribute stereotypes about men and women and what it means to be a woman. And so begins, prejudice and discrimination against women. The experience of sexual violence for a woman, okay, is, men also experience this, but not to the extent that a female experiences it, okay? The overarching goal is this: where you are located in the social class system determines your life chances, okay, guys? But where you are located in the social class system depends on your location in all these different groups, like your location in race, sex, religion. Do you have a power position or a minority position, okay? So this is the idea of the matrix of domination, intersectionality. Put all the categories together, okay? And do a math equation. So who has more power, men or women? Men. So if you're a man, check that box. You got more power. Who has more power, white or non-white? Historically, white in the Western world, for example. Who has more power in the U.S., Christian or non-Christian? Who has more power, the privileged or the unprivileged? Who has more power, those who have a college degree or those that don't? Who has more power, those that have job prestige or those that don't? Again, so if you deny women access to education and jobs and wealth and power, okay, then you're limiting their access, which is limiting their life chances. And this, again, enables males to take a powered, privileged position over females, which is being deconstructed as we speak in the United States, but again, is a global phenomenon that has been around for tens of thousands of years. All right. So again, this is the idea of group membership, everything I'm talking about. The groups you belong to dictate your life chances because they dictate your access to being able to rise up the social class ladder. So does your race affect your ability to go up the social class ladder? It does. If you were African American pre-1960, no white person would ever allow you to be their boss, for example. You weren't going to be given a manager position. However, I'm so glad this is changing, and because that's really dark and really sad and really breaks my heart to talk about it, but that's the way it was. A black man was never given a chance, and how does that then affect black families and the idea of a black man being a breadwinner? And, I just gave another lecture on that in a family class, and it just is all interrelated, how economics and family and race are all affected, and all of these are affected with your life chances, okay? So again, where you're located in the social class system determines your life chances, but where you're located is so based on race and sex and gender and sexual orientation and all these other factors that enable people to discriminate against you and to keep you down, okay? So where you're located in the class system is based upon your status, but your status is based upon your membership in specific groups. Do you have an education or not? Do you have a good job with high prestige or not? Do you have money or not? Are you white? Because if you're not white, you're not male, and it's 1950, the chances are they're not going to hire you to be a CEO because it's 1950. And you still see that in modern times. I think right now there's only 3 Latin Americans that are CEOs, for example, on the Fortune 500 companies. It's not representative, okay? So again, intersectionality, matrix of domination, okay? Where you're located, your status in all those groups, sex, gender, race, sexual orientation, who has more power in each one of those groups, depending on how many check marks for I have power, determines where you're located in the social class system, okay? And where you're located, again, is how much power you have over your own life and other people and your life chances, access to healthcare, access to education, access to a good life for your kids that's safe in a nice place, okay? Are men and women different? The first part of my college I spent studying social class. Then I got into race, and now I'm into sex and gender. And each time I keep asking the question, is there a difference? Is there a difference between a white and a black person? No, not like you would think, okay? So all black people do not share common genetics, and all white people do not, okay? It's just not how it works, okay? So are men and women different? Biopsychosocial. That's how I approach all of the social sciences. Are women and men's bodies different? There are differences. I hate to admit it. I can totally deconstruct racism. I can destroy racism by convincing people that they're not actually white or black or Latin American or Asian or Indian, because, those are races or whatever, right? So I can totally undo race, and I can demonstrate that these differences are not real and that we've just made them up. But when it comes to men and women, there are differences, and I hate it, because if I could just prove that we're not different, it'd be a really easy way to end sexism. But look, there is difference. But again, sexism comes from the meanings attached to the difference. So are the men and women's bodies different? Yep, women can have babies. Women have higher fat percentages on their body, okay? Hormones operate on a different level. It's obvious, okay? Are our brains different? Is the structure of a woman's brain and a man's brain different? There are subtle differences. However, the effect on behavior is absolutely minimal, okay? Do men and women think a little bit differently? Yes, but that could also be because of how we were socialized, because we were taught to think differently. That doesn't mean it's genetics, okay? Now, culture, the social context, that's the other side of it. Are men and women different? If men and women were treated the same way always, would we actually have these very distinct gender roles between masculine and feminine and somewhere along that continuum where we all lie, okay? How much of our sex identity, our gender identity has been socialized by other people? How much of my understanding of what it means to be a man has been socialized by other people, and another person's idea about what it means to be a woman or intersex, for example, and how you're supposed to behave? And we're about to get into gender roles. But to answer the question of are men and women different, again, it depends on the perspective you're looking at it. Yeah, there's biological differences. However, those effects on behavior are minimal. So that means the majority of the differences between men and women, a lot of it at least, has to be in the social context and the way we are raised. Okay? So, just some things to be thinking about. Again, when you open up this chapter like women, there's so much to it. It's economics and biology and philosophy and deep history and, social psychological philosophy and the division of labor. It is just so much information. I know it's already 15 minutes in and I could talk for 15 years on this subject, but that's why I'm studying it now. This is my big passion, because I want to get at these inequalities between men and women. I want to free up the board so men and women have the same opportunities. If men want to play with dolls, we shouldn't be judged. If I want to have long hair and wear a dress, why do you keep calling me a girl? Why do we have these stereotypes? Why is it I'm supposed to have a shaved head and not curls in my hair and some makeup? That's because of social expectations. So, gender roles, social expectations of behavior, attitudes, and activities that structure our lives and our identities. In the womb, we are being socialized to act like a guy or a girl. There's a lot of research on it. The second your parents find out what sex you probably are, they paint your room a specific color and they buy all the clothes a specific color and they start treating you as such. So, this socialization process of socializing people to fulfill gender roles and to fall in line and conform to social norms, this conformity to social norms about gender role, idea that women should conform to gender roles. Women should want to stay home, right? They should not want to go to college. They should just want to stay home with the babies, that kind of stuff. And I have a daughter, and it really makes me sad that I know she's going to get socialized into this idea that a woman should submit to a man. And how do I undo that negative stereotype attached to women? And how do I spare my daughter from hearing the negative stereotypes? That's why you get into sociology, okay? So the socialization process involves learning about gender roles and then people socially interacting with you, symbolically interacting with you, okay? And teaching you about how you should behave. They check you when you step out of line. They praise you and reward you when you fall in line. If you look nice, we call you pretty. If you don't put on makeup one day, what do people say? Whoa, what's different about you? I'm always telling my wife not to put on makeup. I don't know where she likes makeup from. Guys don't wear makeup. Why do girls? So there's a ton of awesome questions in here. I would go deep into this if it was introduction to sociology, but we're in diversity, so we can move on a little bit. But again, this is a hot topic. And the idea of gender role socialization and gender identity and how this is a biopsychosocial process that our identity or gender is influenced by our genetics, but is highly influenced by the social context, the realm of sociology, okay? So from a functionalist perspective, you can look at gender roles as what's the purpose, what's the function, what do they do, okay? So again, gender roles back in the day, men going and hunting and women staying home made sense because, women had to have babies. How are you going to really travel and hunt when you're really late in your pregnancy, for example? If there wasn't a freezer or formula, who's going to feed the baby? So there are some basic biological bases that are evolutionary adaptations, arguably, to gender roles. So that's one way of looking at gender roles. What function does it serve? What purpose does it serve? But in modern times, everyone has to work because it's very expensive to live. So it's very hard to not have a two-parent working household. So are traditional gender roles even functional anymore? Are egalitarian gender roles more functional in modern times? Conflict theory is going to look at gender roles and say, how does it create conflict between men and women and intersex, for example, okay? How does this idea of patriarchy and male as the head of the household and men having all the elite social positions, how does this, affect the lives of women? And then symbolic interactionism is this idea that our meanings attached to gender are socially constructed. Our identity forms as we interact with others and we express our genetic potential and learn about how we should work within those parameters of social expectations and norms, okay? So those are the three sociological theories that you can apply to look at gender roles. The three waves of the women's movement, again, it's 100 years now that we've had the biggest changes, but it took a long time before that of women really pushing the level to where they were finally accepted. But the first wave of the women's movement, suffragist movement, that's when they could vote. Second wave, 1960s, becoming doctors and lawyers, becoming more free, trying to move on from just being teachers and secretaries and nurses, for example. And now we're in the modern wave, which is women are demanding equity across the board. They want their songs heard, okay? They want to be president. Why is there not a parade for women's 100th year of voting this year? It's just something I've been talking about all year, something I want you guys to think about. Because seriously, that's a big celebration. Women's 100th year. But I've heard a lot of attitudes toward this subject from definitely a couple of different perspectives on this. Why should we have to celebrate something we should have had all along? For example, is my favorite one that I've heard. But just a question I want you thinking about. And then feminism. Guys, whatever you heard about feminism in the past, just dismiss it. All feminism is this: equality. That's it. Okay? Whatever you've heard, there's a lot of negative stereotypes attached to feminism. Feminism is the whole goal of the feminist movement is just equality. That's it. Everyone should be able to get a job based upon meritocracy, not based upon how much power you have, your socioeconomic status, and who your parents know, and what college you went to. Okay? Because do we all have equal access to get into that college? Or does it take a bunch of money to get into Harvard and an alumni? Even though children of alumni never do as well, on average, as first timers. All right, so again, I'm not going to delve into the sociology of education and conflict theory, and but feminism and conflict theory definitely go hand in hand. Okay, it's equality between, but some form of inequality is okay, guys, because we need motivation. We need to motivate someone to become a doctor. 20 years of school before you ever make any money, the amount of time. So should a doctor make more than a restaurant line cook? Some form of inequalities may be needed for incentive. And you can look at Ayn Rand's Atlas Shrugged. You can look at critiques of communism, for example. But this idea that a woman should be restricted because of their sex, that is not good inequality. That someone should be restricted because of their race or their religion or because they wear a veil, not good inequality. Okay? So your book talks about economics, and again, it's economics, philosophy, biology. You have to put all of it together, and that's why I love the social sciences, okay? So again, we've talked a lot about intersectionality, the matrix of domination, but these are just examples. Women make 80 cents to man's dollar. Latina women only make 60 cents to a man. Black, 80.67 to men. White women, 0.8 cents to men. And Asian women, 0.86 cents to men. And okay, here's where you can see intersectionality. Why do Latina women make the least amount of money? Okay, why do Asian women make more than white women? And again, that's this intersectionality because Asian women have higher educational attainment than white women. Therefore, they're competing better with men than white women are. Okay, and Latina and black women have been heavily restricted into the lower classes without really the advantage of the education. Okay, and so what's the number one way to get out of poverty? Education. Okay, so occupational segregation has gone on for a long time, but again, who has access to occupational knowledge and technical training and the motivation and the socialization to be good at school, to be able to get through it, to get the better job, to rise up the social class ladder? It's a big, big process, guys. The glass ceiling we talked about earlier, but again, the invisible barrier blocking women from promotion up the social class ladder due to their minority group status, prejudice, discrimination, and oppression. Systems of power, privilege, and oppression. Basic Kimberly Crenshaw intersectionality, okay? Women have been blocked, okay, due to prejudice, discrimination, and oppression by men. That's why we had to have so many waves of the women's rights movement, and that's why it's still going on, because it's not leveled out. Sexual violence is a dark side of this story, okay? And I put in here, when you guys look in your modules, when you guys look at your final project here, I put in this on the bottom for your sample presentation, this one on sexual violence, because this is all about sex trafficking and modern slavery. And so if you guys get a chance to look through this, it's really dark. I do whole sections on this. A lot of my intro classes, I make them go really deep into women's rights. But this is really dark. But it's important that we know it's happening, okay? Because otherwise it would keep happening. So we have to talk about it. Again, I have a daughter. Sexual harassment is illegal. We have been taking a lot of strides, and you've seen a lot of the court cases that have come up lately. Big strides against Harvey Weinstein, for example, and Epstein. Okay, but 1 in 4 women experience sexual violence. That's unacceptable. But again, when we look at society, not everything's pretty. Okay, that's 25% of the population, and that's just an estimation. Based upon good statistics with a margin of error, of course, built in, but that is really, really sad. And there's other intersections. Like if you're a sorority woman, you're twice as likely on top of that to be, a victim of sexual violence. So why being in a sorority? What is it about the culture that they're exposed to, for example? And then the sex trafficking again, that's, really the modern slavery idea that I put that presentation up. So really dark. We always have a sexual violence awareness week, and it's important to talk about this, not because not to re-traumatize, but just because we need to find a way to make things better. We need to expose this for what it really is, because we need to keep people safe. The feminization of poverty, again, is the intersection between being female and social class position. So oftentimes women, especially the single mothers, are highly affected by the feminization of poverty because they're already stuck in the lower classes. And then once you have children to support on top of that, you end up with incredible strain in many areas of your life, but especially when it comes to economics. Just having enough money to take care of everything, pay the bills, put them in a good school system, that kind of thing. So the feminization of poverty is a really big theme that needs to be studied and needs to be discussed so that we can help women across the board. And this, again, there's intersections between this and race too, because there's much higher rates of single mothers that are African American versus white, for example. And why? Well, then you got to start asking questions like, well, how has keeping a black man down for centuries affected the family? And then again, you start to see the intersection between economics and family and race and sex. And when you put it all together, it's mind-blowing. Women in modern times are outpacing men regarding educational attainment. Why? Okay, think about it. I put it in your discussions. I want you to ask that question. Is it culture? Is it biology? Is it because women finally have a chance to go to college? Is it something to do with male culture? What is going on and why? That's an option for your discussion this week. And then, however, despite the fact that women are getting more college educations, men still maintain elite powers. Women are still being filtered into feminine roles. Okay, they're still being filtered into less prestigious, less highly paid jobs that are feminine, like marketing and sales and pharmaceutical sales, Okay, pretty cliche. Again, family life is very complex due to social changes having occurred. There is this idea of the second shift because now it's like half and half, women to men in the workforce, even though because of coronavirus, 850,000 women just left the workforce to go take care of the children because, again, these traditional social roles just got imposed again because of economics, of course. So when things started to hurt and someone had to take care of the kids, it wasn't the man that gave up the job, it was the woman, for example. So again, family life is very complex. You got to be thinking about traditional roles versus egalitarian roles. Men go to work all day, come home and put their feet up, while women are supposed to stay home all day and then cook and clean and have dinner ready right when the man comes in. I mean, that's old school ways of thinking, but how much of that still lingers? How much of that still lingers to this day? So now women are working full time and then the men's coming home and putting their feet up, but then the women are having to do everything around the man's feet while that woman has been working all day. And this hasn't happened everywhere, but guys, the majority of cases it is happening. And so again, this goes into the culture of male versus female. How are we socialized? Whose job is what? What is gender roles for which sex? Who's supposed to cook? Who's supposed to clean? Lot of stuff to think about. Okay, so that's the idea of the second shift. Abortion is a major factor, also something I want you guys to think about. But again, frame it in terms of women's rights. Do you respect women's rights to choose or not? And maybe don't even think about your own personal opinions. Look around you and observe what other people are saying. The book talks about the classic case of Roe versus Wade. That is what is being debated right now in the Supreme Court. Is this a hit to women's rights to take away their rights to abortion? Big questions. The effect of birth control upon women and sexuality is an incredible topic. From the 1960s on, access to contraception has, influenced the sexuality of females, their ability to have children later, their ability to go have careers. I mean, there's a huge process here. And then also the declining birth rate when you look at demographical factors. Women are having less babies right now, but depending on How many babies you have depends upon which region you have. Do you have a career? Are you in the country versus are you in the city? So I've studied all these topics. There's just so much information here. Just tons of stuff to think about, okay? Y'all have a wonderful week. If there's anything I can do for you, please let me know. And thank you so much.